All right, so I just started reading this book, The Panic of 1819, Reactions and Policies from Murray Rothbard. And Murray Rothbard is one of the premier economists who I follow. He's since gone, but one of the premier economists of the Austrian School of Economics, who I'm a huge fan of. He actually had written, I got a couple of his books upstairs in the attic, but he actually had written the foreword for The Failure of the New Economics by Henry Hazlitt, which is analysis of Keynesian fallacies. Big fan of both those guys. Henry Hazlitt did the preeminent economics book, which got me interested in the whole field, Economics in One Lesson, which I read right before I enrolled in George Mason. Anyway, so we're going to read this. I'm going to read you two paragraphs, two paragraphs, and see if that, think about it, see if that reminds you of something that's been happening over the last 30 years or so in our world. All right. And if you want to get this book by Murray Rothbard, here it is. I'll put a link to the show notes. Panic of 1819, Reactions and Policies, and you can read all Murray Rothbard's other stuff. If you want to get let's see, Man, Economy, State's a good one. What has government done to our money? Let's see, there's another one. I think maybe it is Man, Economy and State. A History of Money and Banking in the U.S. That's probably the premier book you should read by Murray Rothbard for sure. I did read this, America's Great Depression with Paul Johnson. Look at that. You know Paul Johnson? Just lots and lots of good stuff from Murray Rothbard for sure. I cannot recommend this guy enough. It actually looks like, what does he look like there? Mises. Anyway, so let's read this. This will be interesting. I'll put a link in the show notes, of course. All right, so this is just from page 11 in the first chapter because I just started reading this. And when I read it, I was like, man, this reminds me of something. So see who you think it is. The boom, therefore, continued in 1818 with the Bank of the United States acting as an expansionary rather than as a limiting force. The expansionist attitude of the bank was encouraged by the Treasury, which wanted the bank to accept and use the various state banknotes in which the Treasury received its revenue, particularly its receipts from the public land sales. The expansion of its note issue encouraged the state banks throughout the country, especially outside of New England, that was the reason for that, to multiply and to continue their credit expansion. The number of banks had increased from 246 in 1816 to 392 in 1818. The Kentucky alone chartered 40 new banks in the 1817 to 1818 session. Bank expansion was spurred by the decision of the Bank of the United States and the Treasury to treat the notes of nominally resuming banks as equivalent to specie. Specie is gold and silver, the bullion, the coinage. So read that again. The Treasury and the Bank of the United States decisions were to treat the notes of nominally resuming banks that are just hanging on by a thread, as actually equivalent to the actual gold. Yeah. The bank thereby accumulated balances and notes against the private banks without presenting them for redemption. Many of these notes were original treasury balances which had been deposited within the bank but not claimed from the state banks. In New England, on the other hand, both the private banks and the branches of the Bank of the United States pursued a conservative policy. Indeed, they were forced to contract as the New England branches of the bank were continually forced to pay out gold specie on the expanded note issuance of the western and southern branches, since by prevailing bank rule, all branches were liable for the notes of all other branches. And as a result, the notes of the Massachusetts Bank declined from a total of $1 million in June 1815 to $850,000 in June of 1818. So in 3 years, it fell by 15% of the actual notes that they had. A generally uniform currency prevailed throughout the country, most banknotes circulating at par. There were exceptions, however. During 1818, for example, notes from some banks in Pennsylvania were depreciated as much as 30%, and in Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee by as much as 12%. Investment in real estate, turnpikes, and farm improvement projects spurted, and prices in those fields rose. Furthermore, the federal government facilitated large-scale speculation in public lands by opening up sales of large tracts in the Southwest and Northwest and granting liberal credit to purchases. Public land sales, which had averaged $2 million to $4 million per annum in 1815, rose to a peak of $13.6 million in 1818 because of the expansion of credit. Man. All right. Speculation in urban and rural lands and real estate using bank credit was a common phenomenon which sharply raised property values. Furthermore, the speculation increased treasury balances in Western banks and added to the flow. Hey, Pablo, hold on a sec. Pablo, hold on a second. Hey. Doesn't like credit expansion on crappy debt offerings, essentially just on fiat currency. Furthermore, the speculation increased treasury balances in Western banks and added to the flow of the bank's notes from west to east. West, where they're issued crappy based on nothing, to the east, so they can be redeemed for specie. And see what's happening? So we're going to issue these notes so you can use that liquidity to go buy lands, and then those notes are going to flow back to the eastern banks, which are run very, very well conservatively, which have to redeem them in gold. Specie. Crazy. Beginning in 1816, there were construction boom in New York, Maryland, Western PA. All right, I'll stop there. But let's see. Anything else I want to read in this right here? No. All right, so off the top of my head, no. But anyway, does this remind you of anything? Man, I was reading this, and I thought, this is the EU right here. This is literally the EU. It's crazy. They're a European Union with a European Central Bank where they have the euro. This is the same thing happening here. We're saying, look, banks, we're going to let you just issue freaking nominally secure notes, which are based on a bank that can't even keep its head above water, Harley. And those will be guaranteed by the conservatively run banks in the New England areas. That doesn't hold any accountability to anybody. They're going to say, look, if I can issue this crappy note and I'm a bank in freaking Colorado, issue a crappy note and get the cash for which I can use, or the liquidity which I can use to turn around and buy land, and is guaranteed that liquidity by gold that's being held in Massachusetts banks, which are run conservatively. Why would I not do this? Exact same thing what we did with Greece, Italy, Portugal, Spain. All these southern EU countries, they sold their soul for the guarantee of the euro, which is backed by Germany, the UK, not anymore. Was it Switzerland or Sweden? One of those countries which went on the euro. But anyway, either way, I can't remember which one it was. But anyway, maybe even France in some regard. They say we are going to be the mainstay to back the currency issue of the euro, and we'll guarantee the debts of Greece, Portugal, and whatnot. But Greece and Portugal didn't stop their spending. And so now they say, look, if we're going to sell our soul to rock and roll, we have got to maintain what the austerity that our neighbors to the north are making sure we have. And now what's happening, though, is you got a rotten apple in there. It rottens all the whole bushel. So even though you got a split between North and South in the European Union, you got the ones in the North run conservatively, relatively speaking. The ones in the South run very, very poorly. And so what happens is the northern don't bring the southern ones up to make it clean. The southern ones bring the northern ones down, which is any reason why the UK said, we're out of this place, especially when the UK, I think, provided like 33% of the funding. It's crazy. Anyway, that's the EU right there, part and parcel. It's nuts, man. And you can't have the good guarantee the debts of the bad. That's just not good. That's socializing risk and privatizing profits. It does not work. Anyway, something of interest. If you want to get the book, go ahead and I'll put a link in the show notes. All right, thanks now.